I kidnapped the Prince Regent's only son because I intended to trade him for my father's life. The little boy took one look at me, burst into tears, threw himself into my arms, and cried, "Mother, you finally came to take me home." My father was scheduled to lose his head at noon. At that very moment, I was pulling a burlap sack over the head of the Prince Regent's only heir. Admittedly, that did not sound like the behavior of a properly devoted daughter. A normal filial daughter, upon learning that her innocent father had been condemned, ought to kneel before the palace gates with her hair disheveled, sob until her heart shattered, and faint at least 3 times. That way, bystanders could praise the depth of her devotion. I was different. My knees were born noble. They bent for my ancestors, not for corrupt officials. Besides, crying was useless. If tears could wash open the gates of the imperial prison, I would have carried 2 buckets of river water there days ago. So I chose a simpler and more direct path. It also happened to be a path that could get all 9 branches of my clan executed. I kidnapped the Prince Regent's son. "My lady," Kingdai said expressionlessly from where she crouched on a tree branch, "is the sack too small?" I lowered my head and examined it. The small bundle inside was remarkably calm. Only a pair of little boots embroidered with gold thread protruded from the opening, swinging back and forth in a steady rhythm. "It does seem a little small," I said with great seriousness. "The food at the Prince Regent's estate must be too good. They have fattened up the hostage." A soft, childish voice came from inside the sack. "I am not fat." My entire body jolted. This child had been kidnapped, and the first thing he cared about was defending his figure. He was only 4, yet his concern for his public image was heavier than a chest of betrothal gifts. I pulled open the sack. A soft, pale little face appeared. He looked about 4 years old, with silky wisps of hair across his forehead, round black eyes, and plump cheeks. He resembled a small hamster that had secretly eaten 3 bowls of sweet rice dumplings and still refused to confess. I cleared my throat and arranged my face into what I considered an appropriately vicious expression. "Young heir, I have kidnapped you." He tipped his head back and stared at me. He looked once. Then he looked again. The next instant, his mouth crumpled. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he launched himself at me like a cannonball. "Mother." I froze. Kingdai fell out of the tree. In the distance, the guards who had just caught up with us crashed into one another in perfect unison. The whole world went silent. I looked down at the little boy in my arms. Then I touched my stomach. Excellent. Still flat. I had not secretly given birth behind my own back. "Young heir." I placed both hands on his shoulders and spoke with great patience. "You may eat the wrong food, but you cannot recognize the wrong mother. Look carefully. I am only 19. Still sobbing, the little boy cupped my face in both hands. I did not make a mistake. Father has a portrait of mother in his room. He looks at it every night. Something exploded inside my head. Well, the Prince Regent, the merciless living king of the underworld who was said to kill without blinking, had not only painted my portrait in secret, but stared at it late every night while doing things that could not be spoken aloud. No wonder his face always looked so grim. He must have been too guilty to sleep. The commander of the prince's guards, Zhuifeng, drew his saber. "Miss Jiang, release the young heir immediately." Holding the child, I took one step back. "Do not come any closer." Zhuifeng sneered. "You are alone, yet you dare hold His Highness's only son hostage. You clearly do not know whether you wish to live or die." I tilted my head and looked behind him. "Oh, is that so? I do not believe you." The moment the words left my mouth, the dry leaves beneath Zhuifeng's feet collapsed. More than a dozen guards fell together into a pit I had prepared in advance. There were no blades inside and no poison. There was only glutinous rice glue so sticky that it could rip off their boots, along with the athlete's foot inherited from their ancestors. Zhuifeng reacted quickly. He stepped on a companion's shoulder and leaped upward. Unfortunately for him, the rope net hidden in the trees tightened the instant he reached the air. It dropped over his head, wrapped around his entire body, and hoisted him into the treetop. I looked up at him. Is being alive not good enough for you? Hanging in midair, Zhuifeng's face changed from black to blue. He was probably wondering why he had joined the army instead of returning home to farm. The little boy in my arms clapped excitedly. Mother is amazing. I corrected him sternly. Call me kidnapper. Kidnapper mother. I fell silent. Fine. At least my profession had survived. I mounted my horse with him in my arms and headed for an abandoned temple outside the capital. Kingdai rode beside me. My lady, what ransom shall we demand? I do not want money. Then what do you want? I looked back toward the capital. I want the Prince Regent to keep my father alive. I also want His Majesty to reopen the treason case. Kingdai considered this. Are we asking for too little? I had been thinking the same thing. I had the Prince Regent's only son in my hands, yet I was exchanging him for only one life. No matter how I calculated it, I was taking a loss. That did not suit my name. My name was Zhang Bukui, a woman who never took a loss. The little boy suddenly pulled a crumpled sheet of paper from his clothes. Mother, I know how to threaten father. I accepted the paper. In crooked handwriting, it said, First, do not allow father to eat. Second, do not allow father to sleep. Third, take away the black box in father's study. Fourth, tell father that mother has abandoned him again. I stared at the final line. Again. The child nodded vigorously. Father said mother abandoned him 5 years ago. 10,000 mythical beasts began galloping through my mind. 5 years ago, I had indeed gone to the northern frontier. I had indeed rescued a badly wounded man who had lost his memory. And to hide from our pursuers, I had indeed pretended to be his wife. But that man had spent every day covered in dust and mud. His temper had been terrible. I had always assumed he was merely a reasonably handsome merchant who had met with disaster. Could it be? Impossible. How could the Prince Regent have been the man I ordered to wash clothes, cook meals, feed horses, and massage my legs? How could the Prince Regent have been the man I drunkenly pinned against a wall and kissed? There could not possibly be a Prince Regent so lacking in dignity. Not unless Great Liang was on the verge of collapse. We had been inside the abandoned temple for less than half an hour when the thunder of disciplined hooves sounded outside. The black armor guard surrounded the temple so tightly that not even water could pass between them. I tightened my grip on my dagger and placed the child behind me. The temple doors were kicked open. Against the blinding daylight, a man in black princely robes walked slowly inside. His features were cold and severe, his body tall and straight. The sword at his waist gleamed with a chilling light. He was, unfortunately, very handsome. So handsome that my first thought was not fear. It was whether kidnapping him as well might earn my father a complete pardon and an additional 3,000 taels in compensation for emotional suffering. The man stopped in front of me. He first looked at the unharmed child, then he looked at the rope in my hand. After a long silence, he spoke. The knot is too loose. He can escape. I stared at him. Xiao Jingheng raised one hand and removed his belt. Zhuifeng cried in alarm, Your Highness. I was equally alarmed. In broad daylight, before so many witnesses, was this man planning to tempt me with his beauty so that I would release the hostage? If so, I could only say he possessed a very accurate understanding of himself. Instead, Xiao Jingheng held the belt out to me. Use this. It is stronger. I looked down at the Prince Regent's belt in my hands. Then I looked at his expressionless face. For the first time, I began to doubt my career as a kidnapper. The little boy peeked out from behind me. Father, mother finally came to take me home. Xiao Jingheng looked at me, his dark gaze unfathomable. Yes, I see her. He reached inside his robes and took out half of a jade pendant. It was shaped like a crescent moon. Near one edge was a shallow scratch I had made with my dagger. It was the half I had lost 5 years ago. Xiao Jingheng looked directly at me. Jiang Bukui, you have owed me a wedding for 5 full years. I had owed many things in my life. I owed a restaurant payment for 3 meals. I owed Qingdai 2 months of profit distributions. I even owed a blacksmith in the Western District a bronze mirror that I had taken to prop up a crooked table. But I had never known that I owed the Prince Regent a wedding. The debt was too large. My first instinct was to deny it. Your Highness has mistaken me for someone else. Without changing my expression, I shoved the jade pendant back against his chest. I have never seen you before. Xiao Jingheng did not argue. He merely said, 5 years ago, White Wolf Valley. You found a wounded man. You named him Ahai. My eyelid twitched. You ordered him to boil water, wash clothes, and feed the horses. My chest tightened. After getting drunk, you pinned him against a wall and kissed him for a quarter of an hour. My skull began to hum. Before leaving, you gave him half a jade pendant and told him to join the Jiang family as your live-in husband once he had saved 10,000 taels. I said nothing. Qingdai silently retreated 3 steps. Zhuifeng wore the expression of a man who desperately wished he could lose his hearing on command. I looked down at Yuanbao. Is your father's memory always this good? Yuanbao nodded. Father holds grudges. Xiao Jingheng corrected him. I remember only important matters. I sneered inwardly. When a man remembered being forcibly kissed for 5 years, people called it devotion. When a woman remembered an unpaid debt for 5 years, people called her petty. The world was clearly much more tolerant of men. We can discuss the past later. I moved my dagger back beside Yuanbao's neck, attempting to restore some dignity to my role as kidnapper. Yuanbao cooperatively leaned closer to the blade. A muscle moved between Xiao Jingheng's brows. Move away from it. Yuanbao looked aggrieved. I am helping mother. You do not need to help until you cut your own bib. Xiao Jingheng looked at me again. I have already ordered your father's execution suspended. I did not believe him. He raised a hand. Zhuifeng immediately handed me a command arrow marked with the Prince Regent's seal. Fresh red clay from the execution ground still clung to it. The report came a quarter of an hour ago, Zhuifeng said, his expression complicated. The execution at Meridian Gate has been halted. General Jiang has been returned to the imperial prison to await a new investigation. The tension that had bound my heart for days finally loosened. Only slightly. My father had been accused of treason, and the evidence was so complete that it looked as though someone had measured him for his coffin in advance. There were letters to the enemy, a foreign gold seal hidden in his possession, and witnesses from within his own army. If I could not overturn the entire case, the execution might have stopped today, only to begin again tomorrow. I want to investigate. I stared at Xiao Jingheng. I want every Ministry of War file, every testimony from the Ministry of Justice, and every report from the northern frontier. Granted. I want an audience with His Majesty. Granted. While Neverlose Pavilion investigates, no government office may obstruct us. Granted. He agreed too quickly. It felt less as though I were threatening him, and more as though he had seized the opportunity to hand me the entire imperial court as a toy. I narrowed my eyes. You have no conditions. Xiao Jingheng lifted his gaze. I do. Of course. There was no such thing as a free meal. There were only dishonest establishments where one finished eating before learning that payment required washing dishes for the rest of one's life. What condition? He pointed at Yuanbao. Return the child to the estate. Yuanbao wrapped both arms around my leg. No. I want to live with mother. Xiao Jingheng was silent for a moment. Then he revised his demand. You will also live at my estate. I stared at him. What kind of condition was that? A package bargain. I had kidnapped his son, and he intended to bring the kidnapper home as well. The hospitality of the Prince Regent's estate was certainly bold. King Dai leaned toward my ear. My lady, the estate provides meals. I remained unmoved. And it has a treasury. My legs weakened slightly. Xiao Jingheng added at precisely the right moment. All expenses required for the investigation will be paid by my estate. I immediately put away my dagger. Your Highness is so generous that further refusal would be discourteous. Zhu Feng's eye twitched. He had probably never seen anyone describe greed with such refined manners. We were preparing to return to the capital when officers from the execution ground arrived on horseback. The supervising official at their head shouted, "Although the Prince Regent possesses authority to govern in His Majesty's place, Jiang Zhenyu's treason is supported by irrefutable evidence. Without an imperial order, the execution cannot be halted." Xiao Jingheng stopped. I brought His Majesty's written command. The official sneered. This humble official saw no impression of the imperial seal. I looked at him. His surname was Cao. He belonged to Chancellor Zai's faction and constantly proclaimed that he was upright and incorruptible. I did not know how upright he truly was, but his head had clearly been designed to display an official hat. Xiao Jingheng did not become angry. He simply raised a hand and removed Lord Cao's hat. You are no longer the supervising official. Lord Cao stared blankly. Your Highness has no authority to dismiss a court official at will. Xiao Jingheng removed the plaque at his waist. Now you are no longer a court official either. Kneel. Lord Cao's face turned blue. The black armor guard drew their blades in one unified motion. Lord Cao's knees weakened. He dropped to the ground. Xiao Jingheng threw the imperial command in front of him. Read it again. With trembling hands, Lord Cao opened the document. This time, not only did he discover the imperial seal, he examined every dragon carved into it with remarkable emotion and clarity. Standing beside them, I suddenly understood the beauty of power. When I wanted someone to stop speaking, I usually had to use my own hands. When Xiao Jingheng wanted someone to stop speaking, he only had to remove a hat. Very efficient. A partnership with him had potential. On the ride back to the estate, Yuanbao sat in my arms eating osmanthus candy. Why do you call me mother? I asked. He pointed at Xiao Jingheng. Father said the young lady in the portrait was the mother he chose for me. I looked toward the man riding ahead of us. Xiao Jingheng's back was perfectly straight. I deliberately raised my voice. Your Highness, you had not even found me, yet you taught a child to recognize me as his mother. Were you not afraid he would choose the wrong woman? Without looking back, Xiao Jingheng said, there was no possibility of error. You are the only woman I ever painted. The mockery I had prepared caught in my throat. It felt like a horse gathering speed, only to be stopped by someone offering it a piece of sugar. The sweetness took me by surprise. The moment we reached the estate, I examined the alleged treason letters. They did indeed bear the Jiang family's secret seal. Only my father and 3 of his most trusted officers knew of that seal. There was an extremely fine notch in its surface that outsiders could scarcely have reproduced. I moved the letter closer to the lamp. After a single glance, I smiled. What did you find? Xiao Jingheng asked. I touched the seal impression with one finger. The notch in the true Jiang seal faces east. This one faces west. Someone copied the impression and carved a duplicate, but forgot that a rubbing produces a reversed image. I looked up. Your Highness, this is not evidence against my family. It is a death warrant the culprit placed directly into my hands. When I visited my father in prison, he was fighting an attendant over a chicken leg. To be precise, he held the chicken leg in one hand and protected a wine jar with the other while watching the attendant, as though the man intended to steal both. I stood outside the bars in silence. "Father." Jiang Zhenyu looked up, grease shining around his mouth. "My daughter is here." He hid the chicken leg behind his back. "There is only one. You cannot have it." The moving father-daughter reunion I had prepared during the journey was beaten to death against the prison bars by that single chicken leg. "You may return to the execution ground tomorrow." I turned to leave. Wait. My father hurriedly called me back. "The Prince Regent sent the chicken. If you want one, ask him. He is rich." I stopped. Soft cushions covered the floor of the cell. Wine and several dishes sat on a table. There was even a pot of mint in the corner to keep away mosquitoes. Anyone who did not know better might assume my father was testing a newly opened underground in rather than awaiting trial in prison. I looked sideways at Xiao Jingheng. "Does your highness treat all prisoners with such care?" "Only my future father-in-law." My father sprayed wine everywhere. I moved aside naturally. Zhuifeng, standing behind me, received the full mouthful in his face. He closed his eyes with a calm expression. He had probably begun to accept that since meeting me, he would never again possess dignity. "What father-in-law?" My father wiped his mouth and inspected Xiao Jingheng through the bars. "Are you the Ahai my daughter picked up 5 years ago?" Xiao Jingheng said nothing. "You look stronger now," my father observed. "Your face is still too cold. I do not know whether you can withstand her temper." I reminded him, "You are still in prison." "Oh." My father immediately grabbed Xiao Jingheng's hand through the bars. "My excellent son-in-law, my daughter is gentle, virtuous, and kind. Since childhood, she has never even had the heart to step on an ant." A rat poked its head from the corner. I flicked a peanut. It struck the rat directly between the eyes. The creature rolled its eyes and collapsed. My father glanced at it. "That was a rat. It does not count." Xiao Jingheng actually nodded. "Father-in-law is correct." I took a deep breath. These two men had acknowledged their relationship faster than I could draw a knife. If they continued talking, they might have names prepared for 8 future children before sunset. I spread the military reports across the table. "Let us discuss the case." The key witness accusing my father of treason was Zhao Wen, a clerk under his command. Zhao Wen claimed he had personally watched my father write the secret letters. He could also reproduce the handwriting, supposedly proving that the original letters had come from Jiang Zhenyu's own hand. The Ministry of Justice soon brought him to the prison. The instant he entered, he dropped to his knees and began to weep. "The general has treated me with immeasurable kindness. I never wished to testify against him, but the laws of the realm stand above private gratitude. I have no choice but to place righteousness above loyalty to one man." He cried with great sincerity. A strand of mucus nearly reached his chin. I quietly stepped back. Not because I feared his righteousness. I feared his nose. "You claim my father wrote the letters himself?" "Yes." "And you can imitate his handwriting?" "I would not call it imitation." Zhao Wen looked deeply pained. "I served the general for many years. I merely became too familiar with his hand." I nodded. "Write it." Paper and ink were placed in front of him. Zhao Wen lifted the brush and quickly produced several lines, almost identical to those in the secret letters. The officials around us nodded. They truly are the same. It would seem General Jiang did indeed. I picked up both sheets. Then I asked, "Why is there such a thick callus between the thumb and forefinger of your right hand?" Zhao Wen hesitated. "I have held a brush for many years. A callus is natural." "Wrong. My father was a military commander. When he wrote, He kept his wrist raised and placed most of the pressure on his middle finger. The true code used by Jiang's army did not lie in the shape of the characters. It lay in pauses hidden at each change of direction. Only an officer accustomed to holding reins in the left hand and writing with the right developed that particular stroke. Zhao Wen had copied the shape of my father's writing. But he did not know that, in genuine Jiang military correspondence, the brush tilted slightly north after every seventh character. I held both pages toward the light. In your version, the stroke turns south after every seventh character. Zhao Wen's face changed. I continued. That is because you did not imitate my father. You imitated the person who forged the original letter. The prison fell silent. Still chewing his chicken, my father added indistinctly, My writing is better than that. I glared at him. This was an imperial treason case, not a calligraphy competition. Zhao Wen forced himself to speak. Miss Jiang is making reckless guesses. Oh, is that so? I do not believe you. I ordered Qingdai to bring in a stack of old account books. They were records Zhao Wen had kept while purchasing grain and supplies for the army over the previous 3 years. In every book, the stroke turned south after every seventh character. Your habit has not changed in 3 years. I threw the ledgers in front of him. My father did not write the secret letters. You did. Zhao Wen collapsed onto the floor. The surrounding officials looked like quail that had been cooked by a lightning strike. The Minister of Justice immediately ordered that Zhao Wen be taken away for interrogation. As the guards dragged him out, he suddenly screamed, Even if the letters were forged, the missing military silver is real. 800,000 taels vanished after being placed under the protection of Jiang's army. Jiang Zhenyu still cannot escape responsibility. I did not stop him, because he was right. The forged letters were only the first layer. The truly deadly accusation concerned the missing army funds. But Zhao Wen did not know that I had detected a faint scent of pine resin in the paper used for one of the military reports. That paper had not been made by an imperial workshop. It was moisture-resistant paper used by the Zai family's southern merchant houses to record large shipments. I turned toward Zhao Jinghang. Your Highness, lend me 30 mounted soldiers. For what purpose? I smiled. To collect a debt. The Zai family owned 12 businesses in the capital. When I arrived at the largest, Faiyuan Bank, the manager was sitting in the main hall drinking bird's nest soup. He did not even lift his eyelids when I entered. Miss Jiang, your family is currently under criminal investigation. This bank will not conduct business with you. I sat opposite him. I did not come to conduct business. The manager laughed scornfully. Then you came to borrow money. I shook my head. I came to give you bankruptcy. At last, he looked at me. His gaze contained all the contempt an older man could feel for someone young. He looked as though he believed he had eaten more salt than I had ever seen rice. I never trusted that expression. Had he truly eaten so much salt, he would have been thoroughly preserved by now. Miss Jiang speaks with impressive arrogance, the manager said coldly. Faiyuan Bank is protected by the Zai family and conducts business with hundreds of merchants throughout Great Liang. What gives you the power to ruin us? I snapped my fingers. Qingdai placed 36 letters on the table. Beginning today, northern furs will no longer travel through Zai trade routes. Tea merchants from the south will cease borrowing from Faiyuan Bank. Horse farms in the northwest have canceled every order placed by the Zai family. 18 restaurants in the capital will no longer purchase Zai grain. The color slowly drained from the manager's face. Impossible. Why would all those merchants obey you? I took the bird's nest soup from his hand and tasted it. Too sweet. No wonder his brain had become sticky. Because they all belong to Never Lose Pavilion's network. The bowl slipped from his hands and shattered. You are the master of Neverlose Pavilion. I nodded. Surprised. Unexpected. Neverlose Pavilion never revealed the identity of its master. The world knew only that it controlled northern trade routes, southern shipping, and more than half the information passing through the capital. No one had imagined that the ruthless merchant said to devour people without leaving bones behind was a general's daughter who spent her days riding horses and hunting. A person needed several identities in this world. It allowed one to ruin one's enemies from different directions. I pushed an account book toward him. Hand over the transportation records for the 800,000 taels moved 3 months ago. Otherwise, within half an hour, every banknote issued by Fayuan Bank will be worth less than the paper in a privy. The manager clenched his teeth. The Zai family will not spare you. I smiled. What a coincidence. I have no intention of sparing the Zai family either. Half an hour later, he knelt on the floor and presented the ledger with both hands. Outside, citizens had already begun lining up to withdraw their silver. The bank did not have enough reserves. Another quarter of an hour would have caused total collapse. I opened the ledger. The missing military funds had not been sent to an enemy kingdom. They had been divided into 13 shipments, transported into the capital through Zai trade routes, and hidden in estates controlled by the family. 300,000 taels had been delivered to a private treasury called the Xian Retreat. The property belonged to the Empress Dowager. I closed the ledger. The case was larger than I had expected. Chancellor Zai had not merely stolen military funds. He and the Empress Dowager had used my father's command of the Northern Army to frame the Jiang family so they could seize control of the frontier forces. When I returned to the Prince Regent's estate with the ledger, Zhao Jingheng was waiting in his study. 3 keys lay on the table. I recognized the middle one immediately. It opened the estate treasury. What does your highness mean by this? An investigation requires money. The estate treasury is yours to use. I immediately protested. How could I possibly accept? As I spoke, my hand had already placed the key inside my sleeve. I moved so quickly that even I did not see it happen. The corner of Zhao Jingheng's mouth seemed to shift. I suspected he was smiling. His face was usually so still that even his smiles were tiny, like a stone statue suddenly remembering it owed someone 2 copper coins. What are the other 2 keys? I asked. One opens the black armor guard's arsenal. The other grants access to my private seal. I raised an eyebrow. You are giving me all of them. Yes. You are not afraid I will take the money and flee. Zhao Jingheng looked at me. I searched for you for 5 years. If you run again, I will follow. My heart suddenly jumped. This man delivered words of devotion without changing his expression. It sounded less like a confession and more like a military order declaring that wherever I fled, he would move the entire estate after me. Yuanbao ran in from outside and wrapped himself around my leg. Mother, everything father owns belongs to you. He looked back at Zhao Jingheng. Father belongs to you too. Zhao Jingheng nodded. He is correct. I looked down at the 2 of them. Their faces resembled each other by at least 7 parts. Their methods of forcing marriage were identical. This place should not have been called the Prince Regent's estate. It should have been called an enormous marital trap. King Dai entered with an invitation. My lady, the Empress Dowager is holding a palace banquet tomorrow. I opened it. The invitation specifically mentioned that Zai Wanru, daughter of Chancellor Zai, would perform a dance in honor of the Empress Dowager's birthday. Rumors had circulated throughout the capital that the Empress Dowager intended to grant Zai Wanru a marriage to the Prince Regent during the banquet. I waved the invitation. Your Highness, your romantic blossom has arrived. Zhao Jingheng frowned. I do not know her. She is called the most talented young lady in the capital. I have never heard of her. She is said to excel in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. What does that have to do with me? I suppressed a smile. She wants to marry you. At last, Zhao Jingheng raised his eyes. Is being alive not good enough for her? I paused. That sentence sounded remarkably familiar. Beside us, Yuanbao nodded forcefully. Father cannot marry her. Why not? I asked. The last time she touched my face, her fingernails scraped away a piece of cake. The little boy looked extremely serious. She steals cake. She is not suitable to be a mother. The reasoning was sound. The evidence was conclusive. I placed the invitation inside my sleeve. In that case, I will accompany you to the palace tomorrow. What will you do? Zhao Jingheng asked. I smiled with great kindness. Help Miss Zai attract attention, of course. First, I will lift her very high. Then I will let her fall very far. The Empress Dowager's birthday banquet was astonishingly extravagant. Golden floor tiles reflected the candlelight. Curtains of pearls hung to the ground. Every plate on the tables was fine enough to buy 3 years of food for an ordinary family. No wonder the Northern Army's silver had disappeared. Apparently, it had all been used to put golden borders around grapes for the nobility. When I entered beside Zhao Jingheng, every gaze in the hall landed on me. Zai Wanru sat below the Empress Dowager in a pale moon-white gown. Her posture was delicate, but her eyes resembled needles dipped in honey. She rose and bowed. Your Highness. Zhao Jingheng did not look at her. He first pulled out my chair. Then he replaced the cold tea in front of me with hot tea. Zai Wanru's smile stiffened. I sighed inwardly. When a man was handsome enough, even replacing a cup of tea looked like presenting betrothal gifts. No wonder Miss Zai's eyes were nearly attached to his sleeves. The Empress Dowager spoke coolly. Miss Jiang, your father remains under investigation, yet you still have the leisure to attend a banquet. The hall fell silent. She meant to humiliate me in public. Unfortunately, my skin was very thick. When humiliation could not find an entrance, it usually returned to the speaker and crawled up her own nose. I smiled. It is precisely because my father is under investigation that I must enter the palace. If I hid at home and wept, others might assume the Jiang family felt guilty. My presence here tells everyone one thing. I raised my teacup. The Jiang family is innocent. Only the guilty should lose their appetite when they see me. Chancellor Zai's chopsticks trembled and fell onto the table. I looked at him. Why have you stopped eating, Chancellor Zai? His face darkened. My hand merely slipped. That is fortunate. I smiled brightly. For a moment, I thought you felt guilty. Several people lowered their heads and coughed. Whether they were actually coughing or hiding laughter was difficult to determine. Seeing her father embarrassed, Zai Wanru immediately rose. Today is the Empress Dowager's birthday. We should not discuss matters of government. This humble lady wishes to perform a dance in celebration. Music began. She entered the center of the hall with floating steps. Her dancing was indeed respectable. At the very least, her sleeves were long enough that, if placed beside a river, she could probably catch 3 fish at once. When the dance ended, praise filled the hall. The Empress Dowager nodded with satisfaction. Wanru is not merely an accomplished dancer. She has also studied archery under a renowned master. She deserves to be called the foremost noble young lady in the capital. Zai Wanru lowered her eyes modestly. This humble lady is unworthy. I can only strike the center of a target from 100 paces. It is hardly remarkable. Then she looked at me. I have heard Miss Jiang was raised in a military household. May I ask about her skill with a bow? There it was. The fish had swum into the cooking pot by itself and thoughtfully brought ginger. I immediately applauded. Miss Zai can strike the center of a target from 100 paces. She must be the greatest archer under heaven. Zai Wanru hesitated. She clearly had not expected such enthusiastic cooperation. I continued praising her. If the soldiers at the northern frontier possessed even half of Miss Zai's talent, the enemy would have packed their homes and fled long ago. In my opinion, Miss Zai should not remain in the capital. She should immediately be named Divine Archer General and sent to command an army. Color rose in Zai Wanru's cheeks. Miss Jiang praises me too highly. I laughed silently. Do not hurry. I had not yet removed the ladder beneath her feet. Palace attendants soon brought bows and arrows. Zai Wanru stood 70 paces from the target and released a shot. Her arrow landed in the outer ring. Applause still filled the hall. Everyone had praised her already. Refusing to clap now would imply that they had displayed poor judgment moments earlier. The Empress Dowager looked at me. Miss Jiang, you may also try. I rose and accepted the bow. Zai Wanru said gently, if Miss Jiang has not practiced for some time, she may stand closer. There is no need. I took a strip of black cloth from an attendant and tied it over my eyes. Gasps filled the hall. Zai Wanru could not restrain herself. Firing blindfolded is too dangerous if someone is injured. Do not worry. I drew the bowstring. I injure only those I intend to injure. The arrow tore through the air. The first shot severed the hairpin above Zai Wanru's head. She screamed as her long hair fell loose. The second arrow flew through the open palace doors and struck the shaft of a carriage 100 paces away. The carriage belonged to the Zai family. A tiny character meaning, CI, had been carved beneath it, the same mark used on the vehicles that delivered military silver to the Xian retreat. The third arrow pierced the exact center of the target and continued through it, knocking down the banner behind it bearing the character for Zai. I pulled away the blindfold. The entire hall was silent. I looked at Zai Wanru's bloodless face. Miss Zai, you shot at a target. I shot at evidence. Zio Jingheng raised one hand. Zhuifeng immediately led his men to seize the Zai carriage driver. They opened a hidden compartment beneath the carriage and removed several military transportation orders. Chancellor Zai shot to his feet. This is a fabrication. I smiled. Do not be impatient, Chancellor. I have not yet begun to behave wickedly. I took out another bundle of ledgers. Last year, Miss Zai donated 30,000 measures of grain to the northern frontier under her own name. For that act, she was praised as the most charitable young woman in the capital. Unfortunately, the grain had already been allocated by the court as relief for disaster victims. The Zai family transported government grain outside the city, then donated it back under Miss Zai's name. You contributed not a single grain of rice and received 3 imperial plaques in return. Zai Wanru trembled from head to foot. You are lying. The ledgers, the driver's testimony, and every travel permit are here. I looked at her. You may continue denying it. The Ministry of Justice can then add deceiving the emperor to the charges. The Empress Dowager's expression became hideous. She was about to speak when Yuanbao slid out of Zio Jingheng's arms, ran to me, and hugged my leg. Mother is the greatest. The hall became silent again. Zai Wanru stared at him. Young heir, what did you call her? Yuanbao looked back. Mother. His small brows drew together. Aunt Zai, why are you always trying to steal someone else's father? Zai Wanru's face changed from white to red and from red to green. I nearly laughed aloud. In a few more years, the censorate would need to reserve a desk for this child. The Empress Dowager spoke sharply. Jingheng, the child is young and ignorant. How can you allow him to recognize a random woman as his mother? Wanru is the princess consort I selected for you. Zio Jingheng set down his wine cup. Since when has my wife required another person's selection? He came to my side and took my hand. 5 years ago, Jiang Bukui and I exchanged a marriage document and tokens. In this life, I will marry no one but her. I turned toward him. A marriage document. He lowered his voice. You pressed your handprint onto it while drunk. Darkness crossed my vision. Alcohol was truly dangerous. It did not merely harm the body. It could decide a person's entire marriage. Zai Wanru stared at me, hatred boiling in her eyes. At that moment, a maid pouring wine suddenly drew a short blade from her sleeve and lunged at Yuanbao. I had already noticed that her footsteps were too light. The instant the blade appeared, I kicked over the table. A wine jug flew into the air and struck her wrist. Zhao Jingheng pulled Yuanbao aside. I seized the maid's arm, twisted it behind her back, and forced her to the floor. Everything happened so quickly that she did not even have time to prepare her final words. I searched her waist and found a palace token. Xian Palace. The Empress Dowager's residence. I looked toward the elevated seat. The Empress Dowager did not change expression. Palace tokens can be stolen. Its presence does not prove a connection to me. That is reasonable, I said. I do not make reckless accusations. I investigate. As the assassin was dragged away, black blood suddenly appeared at the corner of her mouth. She had tried to bite open a poison capsule and kill herself. But I had already dislocated her jaw. I bent over and looked into her terrified eyes. You wish to die. Did you ask my permission? The poison capsule was removed intact. I placed the palace token inside my sleeve. The Zai family. The Empress Dowager. The military silver. The assassin. Every line on the board had now connected. It was time for the players themselves to be placed upon it. The assassin did not endure the interrogation for even one night. She confessed that she was a secret guard from Xian Palace. Her orders had been to kill Yuanbao and place the blame on the Jiang family. The Empress Dowager was determined to eliminate him because he was not Zhao Jingheng's biological son. His true identity was the only son of the late Crown Prince. The Crown Prince had died before the previous emperor, and Yuanbao had still been an infant when the old emperor passed away. To prevent the Zai family from exploiting the child's bloodline and provoking a struggle for the throne, Zhao Jingheng had registered Yuanbao as his own son and publicly declared him his only heir. The young emperor was now growing older, but the Empress Dowager wished to retain control of the court. She feared Zhao Jingheng. She also feared Yuanbao, who carried the late Crown Prince's blood. After hearing the confession, I patted Yuanbao's small head. He was entirely focused on eating steamed egg custard, unaware that at 4 years old, his identity was complicated enough to make every official in the Ministry of Rights lose his hair. Are you afraid? Zhao Jingheng asked me. Of what? Becoming involved in an imperial struggle. I fed Yuanbao another spoonful of custard. I kidnapped your son. If I became afraid only now, my reactions would seem embarrassingly slow. Zhao Jingheng watched me for a moment. You may withdraw. I looked up. Are you trying to drive me away? No. His fingers tightened. I do not want you endangered because of me. I set down the spoon. Zhao Jingheng. I do things for only 2 reasons. First, because I want to. Second, because I very much want to. No one can force me, and no one can make my decisions for me. He was silent for a moment. I was wrong. He admitted mistakes quickly. Unfortunately, his voice was so calm that the apology lacked a little sincerity. I handed him the empty bowl. Wash it. The Prince Regent accepted it and truly walked toward the small kitchen. Zhuifeng stood outside the door, his entire face numb. If the black armor guard discovered that their prince returned from battle only to wash an egg custard bowl, the army's morale might suffer. That night, Never Lose Pavilion sent word that someone intended to bury a forged military tally in the Jiang residence's rear courtyard. The following morning, officials from the capital prefecture would conveniently discover it. I did not stop them. I even selected an excellent location on their behalf. Beneath the old locust tree in the rear courtyard, I ordered a pit dug and a springboard installed. Beside it, we placed a manure cart filled with kitchen waste and rotten vegetable leaves. King Dai examined the trap. "My lady, is this too cruel?" "You are right." After some thought, I poured half a basket of fish entrails into the cart. "Now it is exactly right." At midnight, a shadow climbed over the wall. His lightness skill was respectable. He landed without sound, carrying a wooden box. Unfortunately, he did not know that every roof tile along the Jiang walls had been coated with phosphorescent powder. From the instant he entered, he dragged a faint green glow behind him. He was very easy to follow. He resembled a firefly with criminal intentions. The man reached the old locust tree and began burying the box. The springboard beneath his feet suddenly snapped upward. There was a loud crash. He flew over the courtyard wall and landed with perfect accuracy inside the manure cart. The governor of the capital prefecture emerged from the shadows with his officers. Everyone fell silent. The man in black slowly raised his head. Half a rotten leaf hung from his hair. A dead fish rested across his shoulder. His life had clearly reached a particularly unpleasant and fragrant crossroads. I covered my nose. My lord witnessed everything. This man entered the Jiang residence in the middle of the night and attempted to bury a forged military tally. The governor nodded. The evidence is conclusive. The man struggled inside the cart. Jiang Bukui framed me. I looked shocked. "You climbed my wall at midnight, brought a military tally into my garden, dug a hole on my land, and then fell into my manure cart. How exactly did I frame you? Did I frame you for disliking cleanliness?" The officers lowered their heads to hide their laughter. I pointed at the leaf on his head. "You have also damaged that vegetable leaf's innocence." The man shook with rage. As he did, fish entrails slid down the inside of his collar. At last he broke. The steward of Chancellor Zai's residence ordered me to do it. Excellent. Another carriage of self-destruction had crashed directly into its owner's gate. The capital prefecture sent officers to the Zai residence that very night. At the bottom of the box containing the forged tally, I found a map showing the palace defenses for the upcoming ancestral ceremony. 3 palace gates had been marked in red. On the day of the ceremony, the Empress Dowager planned to replace the palace guards under the pretense of protecting the emperor. She would then accuse the Jiang family of rebellion and kill Zhao Jingheng and Yuanbao. King Dai's face became grave. "My lady, should we inform His Majesty immediately?" I shook my head. "If we arrest people now, we will catch only a few messengers. The Empress Dowager and the Zai family will deny everything. Then what shall we do?" I held the map over a candle. Flames quickly consumed the paper. "Let them raise their army." King Dai stared at me. I smiled. "The coffin has already been nailed shut. We should invite its owners to lie down inside it themselves." At the morning court session the next day, Chancellor Zai struck first. He knelt in the hall with tears streaming down his face. "Your Majesty, the Jiang family concealed a military tally, conspired with merchants, and kidnapped a member of the imperial family. The evidence is overwhelming. Relying on the Prince Regent's protection, Jiang Bukui has even accused an innocent man from the Zai household of planting evidence. This minister begs your Majesty to punish Jiang Zhenyu and his daughter severely, so the laws of Great Liang may remain just." I stood outside and listened for a while. I had to admire him. If Zai Changshan used his talent for revering truth and falsehood to sell flatbread in the market, He could convince people that a single layer contained 8. The young emperor sat on the dragon throne, looking troubled. Imperial uncle, how should this matter be handled? Xiao Jingheng stood at the head of the officials. Summon Jiang Bukui. I strode into the hall. The officials looked at me in many different ways. Some appeared worried. Some looked delighted by my misfortune. A few quietly moved behind pillars, probably to protect their new robes from possible bloodstains. Zai Wanru was also present. She wore plain white robes. Her eyes were red, and she looked more pitiful than a white lotus left freezing outside Xian Temple for 3 days. "Miss Jiang," she said softly, "my father has been loyal to His Majesty throughout his life. How can you slander him merely to free your own family?" I nodded. Miss Zai is correct. Zai Wanru stared. Chancellor Zai frowned. I sighed. Chancellor Zai is so devoted to the throne. How could he possibly embezzle a mere 800,000 taels of military silver? The money must have gone somewhere else. Zai Chongshan immediately said, "Precisely. This old minister discovered that the silver was sent to the enemy through southern waterways." I turned to Zai Wanru. "Does Miss Zai agree?" "Of course," she said quickly. "I saw the transportation records in my father's study. The military silver was sent out by land from the northern frontier." The hall suddenly became very quiet. Zai Chongshan whipped his head toward his daughter. The color left Zai Wanru's face. One had said southern waterways. The other had said northern roads. The father and daughter had failed to coordinate their testimony. I tilted my head. Was it transported by water or by land? Zai Chongshan gritted his teeth. "Wanru is young. She misunderstood what she saw." I asked, "When did Miss Zai see those records in the study?" 3 months ago." "How strange." I took a repair report from my sleeve. The Zai study burned down 4 months ago and was not rebuilt until last month. In which room full of ashes did Miss Zai read those records? Zai Wanru's lips trembled. I remembered incorrectly. I nodded. You confused water with land, and also confused the month. Miss Zai's memory resembles a leaking ladle. It can hold schemes, but nothing useful. Someone in the hall burst out laughing. The young emperor had lowered his head and was writing rapidly in a small notebook. I glanced at the page. It said, "The 19th saying from Jiang's Guide to Managing Officials. She can retain schemes, but not useful matters." My mouth twitched. At such a young age, he had already learned to copy my insults instead of studying proper lessons. He had great potential. I clapped my hands. Kingdai and a manager from Neverlose Pavilion carried 6 large chests into the hall. The first contained account books from Zai businesses. The second held travel permits for the military silver. The third contained the key to the private treasury beneath the Xian retreat. The fourth held secret correspondence between Zai Chongshan and grain merchants near the frontier. The fifth contained the assassin's confession and poison capsule. The sixth was filled with silver ingots. On the bottom of every ingot was the character, Zhen, the official mark reserved for the northern garrison's military funds. An uproar swept through the court. Zai Chongshan's face became deathly pale. All of this was forged. "Very well," I said easily. "Then perhaps Chancellor Zai can explain why every secret letter bears the 9-petaled orchid seal unique to your family. Why were the ingots found in the cellar beneath the Xian retreat? And why was the leader of the convoy transporting the silver your own nephew?" Sweat rolled down Zai Chongshan's face. I walked toward him. "Chancellor Zai, your greatest mistake was not your greed. It was your confidence. You believed everyone serving you was loyal. Unfortunately, the gatekeeper, cook, accountant, carriage driver, and even the servant who feeds your birds every morning all work for Neverlose Pavilion." Zai Chongshan looked up sharply. His expression was extraordinary. He resembled a man who had suddenly discovered he did not live in the Chancellor's residence. He lived inside my intelligence headquarters. Zai Wanru shrieked. I knew nothing about what my father did. I looked at her. Of course you did not. Your only responsibility was spending the money. I ordered her jewelry records and private letters presented. You wrote to the deputy commander of the palace guard and promised to follow him through life and death. You wrote to the son of the vice minister of rights and claimed you would marry no one but him. You sent the same line, "May I grow old beside you," to 3 different men. You did not even bother changing the handwriting. The deputy commander and the vice minister's son both changed color. I displayed the letters one after another. Miss Zai truly deserves her title as the capital's greatest literary talent. One love poem. Used repeatedly. Very economical. Zai Wanru looked ready to die from shame. She rushed toward me and tried to seize the letters. Juifeng stepped on the edge of her skirt. She fell flat on her face. I slowly stepped backward. Not because I feared her. The powder on her face was so thick that I worried the impact might fill the hall with dust. At last, the young emperor closed his notebook. Zai Changshan embezzled military funds, forged army reports, and framed a loyal general. The evidence is conclusive. Guards, take him to the imperial prison. The palace guards stepped forward. Zai Changshan suddenly began to laugh. Your Majesty, do you truly believe you have one? A heavy sound came from outside as the palace gate slammed shut. A horn rang in the distance. Zai Changshan raised his head, his expression twisted. The palace guard was replaced with the Empress Dowager's men before dawn. If His Majesty and the Prince Regent surrender your authority, you may still be granted intact corpses. The officials descended into chaos. Zai Wanru climbed up from the floor, triumph returning to her face. Jiang Bukui, what does your cleverness matter now? The palace gates are sealed. 800 soldiers wait outside. Even if you grew wings, none of you could escape today. I turned toward Xiao Jingheng. Your Highness. She says we cannot escape even if we grow wings. Xiao Jingheng answered calmly. She is wrong. I smiled. Great minds truly think alike. The footsteps of the rebels drew closer. I rolled my wrists. I had waited many days. At last, the main course was being served. The Empress Dowager entered the great hall wearing her phoenix robes. 800 palace guards followed her. She held an imperial edict in one hand and wore an expression of majestic righteousness. The Prince Regent intends to rebel. The Jiang family has conspired with merchants to disrupt the government. Acting upon the late emperor's command, I will purge the traitors from His Majesty's side today. I looked at the young emperor. Your Majesty, did the late emperor leave such an order? The young emperor shook his head. Before grandfather died, he only said that the incense in the Empress Dowager's palace was too strong and gave him a headache. The Empress Dowager's face stiffened. I sighed inwardly. The late emperor had truly deserved his title. His final words had been brief, but their destructive power had endured for years. You stand at the edge of death and still dare to joke. The Empress Dowager said coldly. She lifted a hand. Seize them. All 800 guards drew their swords at once. Their momentum shook the hall. Then came a crack. The first sword broke. Crack, crack, crack. The second broke. Then the third. Then the fourth. In the space of a few breaths, 799 of the 800 swords snapped apart. The final sword remained whole only because its owner was too nervous to draw it from the sheath. The great hall became silent again. The Empress Dowager stared at the wooden fragments scattered across the floor. What happened? I kindly explained. The real weapons were removed yesterday. The black iron was melted down and forged into 800 cooking pots. They are already on their way to the northern frontier. If the soldiers eat well this winter, they will have the Empress Dowager's generosity to thank." Her face turned blue with rage. The 800 guards stood holding wooden handles. They could neither advance nor retreat. They had arrived to commit treason. Now they resembled participants in a failed carpentry examination. Zai Chongshan screamed, "Even without swords, you have the advantage in numbers. Attack." The rebels looked at one another. Then they forced themselves forward. I snapped my fingers. Dozens of enormous nets dropped from the roof and covered the front ranks. At the same instant, white clouds burst from both sides of the palace walls. It was not poison. It was chili powder. I had ordered the imperial kitchens to grind the hottest peppers they possessed for 3 full days. One breath made the eyes pour tears. 2 breaths made a person question every decision in his life. 3 breaths could awaken 18 generations of ancestors. The rebels coughed and stumbled in every direction. The black armor guard charged from behind the hall and surrounded them within moments. A rapid clanging sounded from the palace wall. Yuanbao stood on the battlements wearing a tiny suit of armor, beating a gong with both hands. The bad people's feast has begun. I looked up at him. If this child did not become emperor one day, he could certainly become the finest funeral announcer in the capital. Jiang Zhenyu led the northern troops through the palace gates. My father was supposed to remain inside the imperial prison. But the prison belonged to Xiao Jinghang. The guards also belonged to Xiao Jinghang. The Zai family had believed they locked away a tiger. In truth, they merely gave it a room in which to take an afternoon nap. My father charged toward Zai Chongshan with his saber raised. "You old bastard. You dared accuse me of conspiring with an enemy. Today I will show you the true meaning of attacking from within and without." Zai Chongshan turned to run. My father kicked him to the floor. The Empress Dowager retreated toward the palace doors. She drew a dagger from her sleeve and lunged at the young emperor. Xiao Jinghang moved faster. His sword left its sheath and knocked the dagger from her hand. I threw a rope around her wrist and pulled. The Empress Dowager flew down the steps and landed on the floor, her phoenix crown hanging crookedly. "Jiang Bukui," she shouted, "you are nothing but an uncivilized daughter of a military household. How dare you show such disrespect to me?" I walked toward her. The Empress Dowager is correct. I am uncivilized. That is why I do not understand palace rules. I understand only one law. I crouched and looked into her eyes. A debt of money must be repaid. A debt of blood must be answered with blood. You owe the northern soldiers 800,000 taels. You owe the Jiang family its honor. You owe Yuanbao 2 lives. Today, you will repay all of them. The Empress Dowager's face turned gray. On the other side of the palace, Zai Wanru escaped during the confusion. Somehow, she found a red wedding robe and attempted to hide among the carts delivering celebratory goods outside the palace. Unfortunately, Qingdai had replaced those carts with manure wagons the previous day. Half an hour later, Zhuifeng returned. "Miss Zai has been captured." Where was she hiding? Zhuifeng was silent for a moment. "Inside a manure barrel." I sighed. Why does every member of the Zai household possess such a strong connection to manure carts? Was their ancestral grave built beside a privy? The palace rebellion ended quickly. Zai Chongshan, Zai Wanru, the Empress Dowager, and every member of their faction were imprisoned. The young emperor issued an edict in the Great Hall, clearing the Jiang family of every charge. He restored my father's title as Northern Defense General and ordered the Ministry of Justice to investigate every official involved. The ministers knelt and cried, "Long live His Majesty." Standing in the center of the hall, I finally released a long breath. My father was alive. The Jiang family's honor had been restored. Xiao Jinghang came toward me. There was blood on his black princely robe. His features remained cold, but the way he looked at me was impossibly gentle. Jiang Bukui, marry me. Every official raised his head. On the palace wall, Yuanbao struck his gong even harder. Marry father. I folded my arms. Your Highness, a proposal cannot consist of empty words. Where are the betrothal gifts? Zhao Jingheng appeared to have prepared for that question. Zhuofeng raised a hand. Members of the Black Armor Guard entered in a long line, each carrying a wooden box. The first held the deed to the Prince Regent's estate. The second held deeds to country manors. The third contained records of shops throughout Great Liang. The fourth contained the accounts of the Black Armor Guard's private treasury. The fifth held a complete list of properties. The line stretched from the Great Hall to the palace gates, with no end in sight. Zhao Jingheng placed the seal of the Prince Regent in my palm. The entire estate. All my property. And me. Is that enough? I weighed the seal in my hand. It was heavy. The sincerity was acceptable. I nodded reluctantly. I can consider it. Yuanbao became anxious. Mother, do not only consider it. I looked up at him. Then I accept. Yuanbao cheered. Zhao Jingheng took my hand. His fingers tightened slightly around mine. For the first time, I saw an unmistakable smile on his eternally cold face. It was beautiful. Beautiful enough that I suddenly felt the kiss I had stolen 5 years ago had not been such a poor bargain after all. The capital remained lively for 3 full months after the Zai family's fall. First, there was Zai Chongshan. His property was confiscated, and he was sentenced to exile 3,000 li away. At every postal station along the route, a local storyteller beat a gong and performed a free tale titled, Chancellor Zai stole the army's silver and used 800,000 taels to fatten his family's pigs. I arranged it personally. Execution ended when the head fell. Public humiliation could continue for 3,000 li. At first, Zai Chongshan shouted and cursed. By the 5th station, he began pretending to be deaf. By the 10th, the sound of a storyteller striking his wooden block made his entire body tremble. As for Zai Wanru, she was sent to spin hemp at the Imperial Weaving Bureau. The Ministry of Justice assigned her work, especially suited to a great literary talent. She had to produce 1,000 burlap sacks every year. The front of each sack bore the words, embezzled military funds. The back read, one woman, 3 love letters. Grain merchants throughout the capital competed to purchase them. When the first shipment appeared, it sold out within half a day. Citizens buying rice no longer asked the price. They asked only, do you have any of Miss Zai's sacks today? The Empress Dowager was stripped of her rank and sent to guard the imperial tombs. She had spent her entire life attempting to send others into graves. In the end, her wish was fulfilled. Every morning, she opened her eyes to an entire landscape of them. One might say her life had achieved a fitting conclusion. Lord Cao was dismissed for attempting to continue my father's execution without authority. He returned to his hometown and opened a hat shop. Business was terrible. Everyone in the capital knew that the Prince Regent had personally removed Lord Cao's own official hat. Zhao Wen was sentenced to service on the northern frontier. Every day, he copied military regulations. My father personally established a rule requiring Zhao Wen to turn his brush north after every 7th character. One error meant copying the entire passage 10 more times. It proved extremely helpful in correcting his writing habits. Everyone received the destination best suited to them. A joyful conclusion for all. My wedding to Zhao Jingheng was set for the 9th day of the 9th month. On the day before the ceremony, several noblewomen who had once mocked me for being unable to find a husband volunteered to help. I was deeply moved, so I assigned them the most important task. counting the betrothal gifts. The Prince Regent's gifts extended from the eastern side of the capital to the west. There was gold, silver, jade, property deeds, shops, antiques, horses, silk, and chest after chest of valuables. The noblewomen counted from dawn until sunset. Their voices became hoarse. Their hands began to shake. With tears in her eyes, one woman asked, "How much remains?" King Dai opened the list. "We have completed 30%. The women immediately reached for the wall to support themselves. I stood nearby eating grapes, deeply satisfied. Making those who once mocked you personally count every sign of how well you now lived. That was the true meaning of repaying resentment with virtue. On the day of the wedding, red decorations stretched for 10 li. I entered the Prince Regent's estate wearing a phoenix crown and embroidered bridal robes. Yuanbao wore a little red outfit and clung to my skirt. "Mother is very beautiful today." I bent down and pinched his cheek. "Am I not beautiful on ordinary days?" He immediately corrected himself. "Mother is beautiful every day." A quick response. The blood of the imperial family was impressive. During the wedding ceremony, my father sat in the place of honor, smiling so broadly that his beard trembled. The master of ceremonies called for husband and wife to bow to one another. Zhao Jingheng had just begun to bend when my father said, "Wait." Every guest looked alarmed. I raised my head as well. Had my father changed his mind at the final moment? Was he planning to demand more betrothal gifts? He looked at Zhao Jingheng. "If my daughter strikes you after the wedding, what will you do?" Zhao Jingheng answered calmly, "Massage her hand so it does not hurt." "What if she tears down your estate?" "I will hand her the axe." "What if she wishes to ride outside the city in the middle of the night?" "I will prepare her horse." My father nodded in satisfaction. "Continue the ceremony." The master of ceremonies wiped sweat from his forehead. To everyone else, this was a wedding banquet. To the Prince Regent, it resembled an examination for becoming a husband who married into the bride's household. Fortunately, his answers were acceptable. On our wedding night, I sat beside the bed and watched Zhao Jingheng approach. Red candlelight reflected in his eyes and softened his usually severe face. He stopped in front of me. "5 years ago, you said you would marry me into the Jiang family once I saved 10,000 taels." I raised an eyebrow. "And I have saved enough." I could not help laughing. "Your Highness, your entire estate now belongs to me. Are you marrying me, or am I marrying you?" Zhao Jingheng bent closer. "Either is acceptable, as long as you do not leave again." He was very near. His breath touched my ear. The horde of mythical beasts inside my heart suddenly stopped galloping. They sat down in neat rows and began eating wedding candy. I wrapped my arms around his neck. "Do not worry. The estate treasury is still here. I cannot bear to leave it." Zhao Jingheng laughed softly and began to lower his head. The door suddenly opened. Yuanbao stood in the entrance, barefoot and holding a pillow. "Mother, I want to sleep here too." Zhao Jingheng's face immediately darkened. "Go back." Yuanbao hugged the pillow more tightly. "No. Nanny said a family should remain together. You are already 4. A 4-year-old is still a child." With practiced movements, Yuanbao climbed onto the bed, lay directly in the middle, and wrapped himself in a blanket like a silkworm. He looked at Zhao Jingheng with great seriousness. "Father is old. Father must not become too tired." I laughed so hard that I fell sideways onto the bed. Zhao Jingheng stood beside us, looking more displeased than he had during the palace rebellion. In the end, he could only lie on the outer side and hold my hand across Yuanbao. With his eyes closed, Yuanbao spoke again. "Father, what is it? You cannot bully Mother." Zhao Jingheng looked at me. "I would not dare." I squeezed his fingers. You had better not. After the wedding, I did not abandon Neverlose Pavilion. Some officials believed the Prince Regent's wife should not conduct business, much less become involved in investigations. One censor delivered an impassioned speech during morning court, declaring that a woman's duty was to serve her husband and raise children. When Xiao Jingheng finished listening, he asked only one question. Who made her unhappy? The young emperor immediately pointed at the censor. Him. The next day, that official was sent south to investigate the salt tax. Before his departure, I personally gave him a 300-page manual on identifying false account books. I hoped he would finish it during the journey. If not, it did not matter. The southern salt merchants would teach him the lesson themselves. My father resumed command of the northern army. Later, he grew tired of the noise at court and voluntarily retired. He bought an estate outside the capital and raised horses. His favorite activity was taking Yuanbao to the pond at the Prince Regent's estate and using explosives to catch fish. Each time, the old man and the little boy disappeared immediately afterward, leaving Xiao Jingheng to order the pond repaired. Qingdai married Zhuofeng. On their wedding day, the two of them exchanged fewer than 10 sentences. Yet on the following morning, Neverlose Pavilion acquired 137 new pieces of private information from inside the Prince Regent's estate. Clearly, quiet people did not lack things to say. They merely preferred listening to others through walls. After the young emperor assumed full authority, he granted Yuanbao the title of imperial brother and named him heir to the throne. On the first day of his formal education, Yuanbao escaped his lessons and came to find me. He complained that the grand tutor spoke too slowly and had covered only 3 pages in an entire morning. I asked what he wanted to learn. He thought for a moment. I want to learn how mother makes bad people confess by themselves. So I taught him 3 things. First, do not rush to contradict someone. Second, encourage him to speak more. Third, the more he speaks, the more earth he throws into his own grave. Many years later, Yuanbao became the finest interrogator among all the heirs Great Liang had ever known. Officials privately called him the smiling king of the underworld. Only I knew that after leaving court, he still ran into my courtyard holding a box of pastries and calling me mother. As for Xiao Jingheng and me, we continued to argue often. Usually, I did all the speaking while he nodded. Occasionally, he resisted. For example, when I decided to turn the rear courtyard into a horse racing ground, he remained silent for an entire day. The next morning, he purchased the 2 neighboring residences as well. The courtyard is too small. Use all 3. I looked at the new property deeds and felt that this man's method of resistance was extremely weak. I liked it. Eventually, a story spread throughout the capital. People said the daughter of the Northern Defense General had been bold enough to kidnap the Prince Regent's only son in order to save her father. In the end, she not only rescued her father, destroyed a powerful chancellor, and crushed a palace rebellion. She also placed the Prince Regent himself and his entire estate inside her pocket. Someone once asked whether I had imagined such an ending when I first kidnapped Yuanbao. I considered the question seriously. No. At the time, I only wanted to trade him for my father's life. Sitting beside me and peeling grapes, Xiao Jingheng added calmly, at the time, I was thinking that I had finally caught her. I glared at him. Who caught whom? He placed a peeled grape against my lips. You caught me. Yuanbao nodded vigorously beside us. Mother is the greatest. I ate the grape and leaned back in satisfaction. Sunlight poured through the window. Outside, my father was teaching Yuanbao's new study companion how to blast fish from the pond. Qingdai was chasing Zhuifeng with an account book and demanding her share of the profits. The emperor had sent me a chest filled with confessions from corrupt officials and asked me to examine them when I had time. Xiao Jingheng took my hand. No investigations today. Then what shall we do? Stay with me. I considered this. Is there silver? He placed the new key to the estate treasury in my palm. Yes. I immediately leaned against his shoulder. Your Highness should have said so earlier. People claimed I was the most lawless woman in Great Liang. They were wrong. I was not without law or heaven. My law was that every injury must be repaid. My heaven was sitting beside me, peeling grapes. As for those who once wished to make me suffer, the grass above their graves was probably very tall by now. And I, Jiang Bukui, had lived exactly as my name promised. I had never once taken a loss.